guys? Welcome back to Strong Successful Male. So for today, I'm going to run an article that's definitely a huge win for men as well as their kids. Titled, Divorce Plunged in Kentucky, Equal Custody for Fathers is a Big Reason Why. And a shout out to all you guys that have sent me this article over the last several weeks wanting me to cover it. This article is all about how years ago in Kentucky, I think 2017, 2018, they passed a law that basically made it out to be that when there's a divorce, custody of the kids is 50-50. And to no surprise, since then, divorce rates have plunged like 25, 30%. I'm hearing that number bouncing around here. And why is that? Because it's no longer in the interest of the wife to get divorced. Because no longer is a situation where pretty much by default, the ex-wife gets the primary custody of the kids, and the husband has to pay some ridiculously large child support check. Oh, no, no, no. Now it's 50-50, and as a result, the husband gets half the time, and she gets half the time. She can't toy with him for power of the kids, and he doesn't have to shell out a check or one that isn't ridiculously large. And the thing is, other states in varying degrees have taken on laws like this, and many others are really looking into it. So this is a big win for men as well as the kids. But to no surprise, a lot of wives, particularly in Kentucky, aren't too happy about this. Now, this article is from the Wall Street Journal, and it's a woman writer, and so she's going to go over this whole thing and talk about, give different examples of good situations for fathers and all that and kids. But also, given the fact of it's a female writing this in the Times, she's also going to give examples about how it's a bad deal for some women, dealing with very bad abuse of husbands and stuff like that, which of course is awful. And it's almost like she's making out to be that's the norm, which is absurd, because we all know darn well there's a lot of great fathers out there who got screwed because automatically by default, the wife gets the kids or the primary time with the kids, the house, the big alimony, the big child support, which we all know darn well that big child support wasn't all for the kids, and the guy gets royally screwed. So this is a win for the guys, and it's a part of our long journey for some real equality here. So guys, I'm going to go over this one. This is longer, but I think you'll appreciate it, and you'll also pick up on the bias pretty darn quickly to no surprise. So it starts off, and by the way, I'm a little sick, guys, so pardon my throat here. me clearing it here. It says here, the dads were not all right. It was 2017, and across Kentucky, divorced fathers were coming together against a common enemy, a custody system they felt favored their ex-wives. What do you mean felt, lady? It did benefit the ex-wives. Get the fuck out of here. Although custody laws in Kentucky and elsewhere granted judges discretion to decide what split was in a child's best interest, aggrieved fathers claim that this typically meant relegating them to the role of the every other weekend dad, Disneyland dads, forced to cram 2 days of fun into what mothers had 2 weeks to create. Well, yes, it came down to the judges, and these judges are usually morons. You become like Uncle Dad instead of a parent, said Rob Holdsworth, 53. In 2014, he reluctantly uprooted his life and civil service career in Dayton, Ohio, to relocate to Bowling Green, where his ex-wife had moved with their 2 sons. He took the only job he could find, working nights in a soap factory to see the boys just a few times a month. You hear that? That goes to show you a good father would do anything. Picked up and left, took a job he didn't want to take, working nights to see them every other freaking weekend. Do you think most moms would do that for their kids? I mean, some would, but the majority would not do that. No, not even close. He said, it was very depressing to be here, a couple miles away from my kids, and be told I'm not going to get to see them more than that, Holdsworth said. Alone in the house near his son's elementary school, wandering in and out of their empty bedrooms, staring at the Daddy You Are Our Superhero crayon poster that they gave him for Father's Day. Holdsworth had more time than he knew how to fill. He resolved to spend it lobbying for legislation, granting dads like him more rights in a divorce or separation. Good for him. My hat is off to him. Bravo. And all the fathers out there and the guys that didn't back down. Around the country, the fathers' rights movement was gaining momentum. Dividing time and decision-making equally between parents, advocates argued, reduced children's feelings of abandonment, promoted gender equality, and lowered tensions between feuding couples. Well, there's always going to be tension between couples that are divorced, but still, Remember, this isn't just for the guys and saving money on the big child support checks and them being sad because they can't see their kids. This is for the kids that need their fathers in their lives. Not just boys, but also girls. Because we all know darn well what happens, not all the time, but a lot, when they're left to have the single mom handle everything. Because she can't handle everything. Full-time job, if she has a job, juggling all these things and being there. And we also know darn well when it comes to boys, moms generally are softer than the boys. Boys need that male influence to give a kick in the butt when they need it. And all boys need a kick in the butt. And the girls need a good father too. And I don't need to go into that reason why. There is no law that affects more people other than taxes or traffic, says Matt Hale, Vice Chair of the National Parents Organization, an advocacy group formerly known as Fathers and Families. Giving kids equal access to both their parents is just common sense. Dads like Hale and Holdsworth found a sympathetic ear in lawmakers, including Jason Nemes, a Kentucky state rep whose own father was his primary guardian after his parents divorced. In 2018, Kentucky became the first state to pass a law making equally shared custody the default arrangement in divorces and separations. Bravo, all you guys in Kentucky that voted for the people that voted for that. Or maybe you voted for that? Bravo. 4 other states, Arkansas, West Virginia, Florida, yeah, and Missouri, have since passed their own versions of Kentucky's custody bill. Around 20 more are considering close to passing similar laws, according to an analysis by the National Parents Organization. Well, there you go. All it takes is a spark to get a fire going. There you go. Clearly others and locations are saying this is a good idea. The law has become a model for other states, not least because Kentucky's divorce rate has plummeted. Between 2016 and 2023, it fell 25%, compared with a nationwide decline of 18%, according to analysis by the National Center for Family and Marriage research at Bowling Green State University. Now, some people could say, why is that? Because the wives are realizing it's not as good of a deal if they get divorced than they would be in other states or in the past. Because before, wife wants a divorce, even though she did everything wrong. Let's just say for argument's sake here, the husband did everything right on all fronts. She cheated, wanted open marriage, was bored, or simply married him to simply get a ring on her finger, a paycheck, and kids, and now wants to divorce him and milk it for all it's worth. Well, now 50-50 custody. She's not going to get those big checks, if not at all. And she can't have leverage over him with the kids. So it's not as good of a deal. So I was like, okay, I'll stay in the marriage. You know, a lot of fathers will stay in bad marriages where the wife's a total a-hole because he knows he's going to get screwed. And it's so unfortunate. Or he's there to protect the kids from a wacko wife. Because even if she's a wacko, oftentimes the courts have the kids go with mom. Well, at least not in Kentucky and these other places. Hale calls the drop in the divorce rate an unintended bonus of the custody law. He suggested that parents are increasingly likely to stay together because they realize they'll be in regular touch regardless, so they might as well work it out. It ain't just that with the wives, it's about the freaking money. He added that he's heard stories of couples who decide not to break up because of the presumption of shared custody, and years later are glad they stayed together. Yet some argue that these impressive numbers hide a far more complicated story. Okay, so here we go, where she's going to get into some stories of some women who, if they're being truthful, are in very bad situations. And I'm not going to deny there aren't some guys out there that are total fucking scumbags that got no business being fathers and do some awful shit. It does happen. But we all know darn well that oftentimes, well, no, okay, let me rephrase that. Many a times, things are exaggerated or even made up so the gal can get revenge on the husband and get all the power and money. It happens. We know this. She says, people think divorce rates going down is a good thing and that it indicates stability in marriages. Well, that's not always the case, said Bowling Green Family and Marriage Center Assistant Director Krista Westwick Payne. She explained that the divorce rate typically goes down when couples believe the costs of leaving outweigh the benefits. Some people are staying married to abusive partners, critics of the law say, because they are terrified of leaving their children alone with a parent of history of violence. They know their kids are safer if they stay, said Elizabeth Martin, chief executive of the Louisville-based Center for Women and Family, which provides services to victims of domestic violence, most but not all of whom are women, even if it means taking some beatings. Notice it's the Center for Women and Families. Where's the Center for Men and Families? Where's the men's location? You know anything about that? I'm not saying that crap doesn't happen. I'm not saying you don't have guys out there that are raging alcoholics or pieces of shit. But still, to try to make it out to be that's the norm or more common than more than a small percentage, that's horse crap. In harm's way, it says here, many of the Kentucky law's detractors are quick to acknowledge that dads often struggled in custody hearings before the new mandate took effect. They agree that a more equitable division of parenting labor is a noble goal. They're just not so sure a presumption of shared custody is the best way to do it. They worry, too, about the dire cases that seem to be slipping through the cracks. Says here, we have seen this law put kids in harm's way, said Darlene Thomas, who runs Greenhouse 17, one of the state's largest domestic you-know-what programs. She explains that judges are wary of trampling on parents' rights, which places a hefty burden on any who hope to provide and prove that a fellow parent is abusive or that splitting custody evenly is not in the best interest of the children. She says it makes it harder for judges to consider the whole picture. So, okay, you're going to have some issues. Greenhouse 17's 42-bed shelter for domestic you-know-what survivors sits amid horse pastures, rows of carefully tended flowers, and a grove of apple trees 20 minutes outside of downtown Lexington. Thomas says Kentucky's shared parenting law has upended the nature of her work. Before 2018, she said she helped her clients legally, physically, and emotionally separate from their abusers. Now she says she's often helping them figure out how to stay. What the presumption says to many survivors is this: why fight it? Why tell your story if there's presumed that there will be 50-50 timeshare, said Thomas. In other words, she leaves an abusive husband, and no matter what, it's going to be 50-50, and the kids are stuck in that environment with that shithead. That's a fair grievance, indeed, in the situation where the guy truly is a piece of shit. But to make it out to be that that's the norm is horse crap. Nobody, man or woman, should be in a situation where they are truly 100% physically, emotionally, psychologically, or the kids in that bad situation. But to make it out this is the norm, to make it out to be, well, based on that, and probably a small percentage of the big picture, go back to where things were, is a terrible idea. Actions have to be taken to fix some of these things with the judges and all, but still. She says women file into her office one by one, each of their stories more disturbing than the last. One mother who shares custody with her ex-husband said her son had returned to her with a dislocated shoulder and admits he doesn't feel safe with his father. Both her son and daughter, she said, have recently come back distraught after their dad started throwing rocks at cats and wanted them to join him. Okay, you bring up doing bad things to animals, that's going to get my blood to boil. And that guy's obviously, if this is true, a piece of shit and, well, do anything to animals. And I have a whole way of handling that type of justice. But the point is, then obviously if he's doing some pretty awful things, and we can agree there if that's the truth here, actions need to be done here. But another mother of two young boys said she worked up the courage to leave her husband over 2 years ago, after years of being hit and strangled, but was horrified when a judge awarded her ex 50% custody. She pulled up photos on her phone showing how her sons had returned from their dad's house with fingerprint-sized bruises on both sides of their ears and other ones on their arms. She now wonders if her boys would have better off if she stayed with her ex. In other words, yeah, if she stayed with the ex, she could be a shield, a barrier, a buffer to protect her boys. Again, if this is true, this is terrible, and things need to be done about this. But it doesn't mean you go back to the way things were, where the men are screwed and the kids are screwed because they automatically just go with the moms, because they make it out to be that every guy's going to be like this. Not every guy's going to be like this, not even fucking close. Hale, who wrote the first draft of the shared custody legislation, says there are lots of safeguards in Kentucky's law that protect children from being placed in a dangerous situation. He notes, for example, that if one parent is subject to domestic you-know-what, order, the presumption of a 50-50 custody is automatically overturned. Okay, well that's good. Let's make sure they stick to that. For Kimberly Rummage, 39 years old, dozens of phone recordings of her husband's abuse weren't enough to persuade a Kentucky judge to override the custody split. She said that after her husband nearly offed her in 2023, she applied for emergency protection order and filed criminal charges. When he was arrested, she assumed the worst was over. But just a few weeks after her husband's parents bailed him out of jail, Rummage said he was granted 50% of custody of their son. Well, if that's true, that is seriously fucked up and they got some work to do. Again, if he did what she says. She said the judge indicated his abuse wasn't a factor since he didn't lay hands on their son and was contesting the domestic violence protective order. A few months later, she said that I got the domestic violence order and nothing changed. Rummage's ex didn't reply to a request for comment. Well, again, if this is all true, then it's, obviously there's work to be done. But there's certainly the greater good here when fathers are getting 50-50 custody after a divorce or split. Because the old way was fucked up. Completely wrong on so many fronts. 3 Christmases. Now we're going to get into positive stuff here. We've all been watching Kentucky, said Emma Johnson, a divorced shared parenting advocate, the author of the 50-50 Solution. She said she believes her kids are best served by spending as much time with their father as they do with her. Well, that's good to hear. Johnson argues that the expectation that kids belong with their mothers holds women back. She says, I can't get ahead at work if I'm always taking time off to pick up a sick kid, said Johnson, who lived in Richmond, Virginia. Well, I hope this isn't about her getting ahead. That's the big reason here. Micah Wood Pence, a family court judge in Kentucky, whose office is full of stuffed animals for children to take home, spends hours on the phone discussing the law with judges in other states. She reassures them that a 50-50 custody standard won't limit their ability to rule as they see fit in the individual cases. The law is meant to be a helpful starting point. Pence tells them not in order to be followed blindly. To reinforce her point, she reads out snippets of Kentucky's amended law. The court will start with the assumption that both parents should have equal rights and the responsibilities regarding their child's upbringing. This, she explains, is exactly the kind of fairness she had hoped for during her years representing fathers as a family lawyer before becoming a judge in 2018. Hey, that's a female judge that I like, one that represented dads, and now she's on the bench. Good. There will always going to be concerns, said Pence. The way to counter concerns is not make bad laws for everyone else. It can't set up laws for all families that are based on the worst circumstances. But Douglas Najami, a family law professor at Yale Law School, is not convinced that the law adequately accounts for what could be wrong. We know many people experiencing domestic you-know-what, and for good reasons don't necessarily get an order of protection. Explain that many women are too afraid of retribution or not being believed to pursue a formal order. Now there's a presumption of equality that they need to overcome. It seems to me that women have been believed for a long time. The whole believe all women thing has proven, sadly, many fucking times to be a very bad policy. Fathers' rights advocates take heart in the example set by Holdsworth in Bowling Green, who credits the law with allowing him to play a more meaningful role in the lives of his sons. His devotion to his children is evident throughout his home. Fruit and granola bars are laid out neatly on kitchen countertops, and framed high school report cards decorate the walls, alongside a chart listing the dollar value of each A. He says, I started paying them for their grades because that's how I got a say, and that's their job, Holdsworth said. He can afford $30 for straight A's, he added, because the custody judge ruled that Holdsworth no longer had to pay child support. Recently, Kentucky's legislature decided that parents who spend more time caring for their kids should pay less in child support. His ex-wife didn't respond to a request for comment. Yeah, well, I'm sure she has a comment. It's probably with a lot of bad words. I like that he rewards the kids for the good grades with, some money and things like that. My parents did that too. The problem is I was such a slacker and screw up in junior high and high school. It didn't have much effect. My sister made out like a bandit in junior high and high school when she got straight A's, and she always did. Not me. And I'd get fined if I got a D or a fucking F. But some legal scholars worry that financial incentives muddy what is the best interest for the kids. A big concern with the law is that there are a lot of dads are going to say they want 50-50 custody, but what they really want is to reduce their child support, said Ralph Richard Banks, a family law professor at Stanford. I don't fault fathers out there that don't want to pay massive amounts of child support because so many of it is absurd. Because they know darn well it isn't all going to the kids. Come on here. Holdsworth says that of the men he's met through the fathers' rights movement, maybe a third of it was obvious to me that all they cared about was the money. But he also added most dads want their kids for the right reason. Yes, they do want their kids for the right reason. And even the ones that have a grievance about the money, you can't totally fault them. They've been screwed forever. I mean, you know how many guys get divorced and they're like practically living in their cars? Not like me, because I don't live in my car, in spite of all you guys joking around that I live in my car. I have a fucking house. How many guys are reduced to poverty because they have to pay for this and this and this and this? It's absurd. In Henderson, Kentucky, Jordan Piles, 32, and his ex-girlfriend Ashlyn Harrell, who's 29, broke up when she was still pregnant with their daughter. Piles said he didn't get to spend nearly as much time with the daughter until Kentucky's legislation began debating the 50-50 law, when the daughter was 3 years old. He explained that his ex became more amenable to joint custody when she knew it was going to become law. Shocker. Every day I wasn't with my daughter was one less day of her childhood and one less day I can make a positive influence on her life, said Piles, who works in construction sales. Harold said she's been surprised by how the equal parenting split has worked out. Knowing that she and Piles each have an equal stake in their daughter's life, she said, has allowed them to work together better. Good. That's what you want to hear. She says, when we first started, I was scared and nervous of all the things. Said Harold, a homemaker. Jordan and I are two very different people, so it was very worrisome. But it's really worked out smoothly for the most part. Their daughter, who's now 11, can't remember a time when she wasn't spending equal time with her mom and dad, as well as her step-parents and half-siblings on each side. Dancing around her dad's kitchen, snacking on a bag of popcorn, she says she feels bad for her friends who don't get to spend as much time with each of their divorced parents. The best part is definitely having 3 Christmases, she said, listing off her moms, dads, and grandparents. But on a real note, it's probably not having to miss out and see one side of my family for so long. And that ended with the 11-year-old daughter singing the praises of this law. So, I see the good vastly outweighing the bad, and I'm going to address this again. There are some men out there who are fathers and are pieces of fucking shit. And I know most of you guys will understand what I'm coming from with that. And do awful shit. But you know darn well, that's painted in a way like it's more common than it is. And therefore that has justified the shitty laws that have been going on for so long, horribly unfair laws, not just to the fathers, but also the kids. And I'm thanking God that this has started in Kentucky and spread to other states. Now other states are weighing this out and so forth, and hopefully it goes on that path. And what a big freaking surprise that divorce rates have come down substantially in Kentucky and will likely happen in other states as well. And this is great for the fathers, and this is great for the kids, because the kids need a father, boys and girls. So I see this as a win for the guys. So whenever there's a big win for any type of movement, that only encourages the movement to keep pushing forward in other things. You know how it goes. So guys, what we do here, the videos I do, and you guys doing your part, has all helped in some capacity. I like to think that. And I hope that it's helped you guys in your own personal lives and spreading towards larger movements of change going forward. We still got an uphill battle, and there's a lot of things to fight for, but this gives hope. But there's going to be roadblocks. There's going to be things like that, but you can't give up. So good for the people in Kentucky. Anybody from Kentucky out there? I salute you. All right, guys, that's it for today. Be sure to comment down below. Let me know what you think about this. And be sure to like the video, share it with your friends, and subscribe. Catch you next time.